for that. I'm talking about the internal process. And at the end of the day, was there any kind of documentation of what occurred and a written counseling or admonishment or whatever nomenclature you want to use?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. And you say that it was unfounded. Who specifically told you that it was unfounded?
Gina Cordero.
Did you see a written document that stated as much, that it was unfounded, the allegations were unfounded?
I did not review their documentation that they had.
So was this told to you verbally?
Yes.
Was Peter McLeod present when this was told to you?
I believe he was in that meeting, yes.
When did that meeting take place, sir?
At the closeout of their investigation when it was determined to be unfounded.
Do you recall the month and the year?
No, I don't.
Do you recall where it took place? Was that
Yes.
SunTrust building?
In Gina Cordero's office in SunTrust.
Okay.
Peter reported to Jim Bowden. Jim Bowden reported to Gina Cordero. The meeting was in Gina Cordero's office with me present with Melissa for the closeout.
Do you do the performance evaluations for Melissa Merklinger, or did you do them?
Yes, I did.
And how often did you perform these evaluations?
Evaluations are ongoing in the Disney culture. The formal year-end closeouts with are done on an annual basis.
What month are they typically done?
They're typically done in the end of the fiscal year.
Okay.
As bonus planning and merit planning is subsequent to that and is delivered before the end of a calendar year. So there's a window of time, September, October timeframe, that the annual performance review is discussed.
And were there any notations in that performance evaluation that you did that related to Ms. Book's allegations against Merklinger?
No.
To your knowledge, did she receive a bonus that year?
Yes.
All right, so does Disney have a sexual harassment policy?
Yes.
And does it, in that policy, offer a definition of what constitutes sexual harassment?
I don't know specifically if there's a definition within the policy.
You're familiar with the policy, though, right?
I'm familiar that there is a policy on sexual harassment with the Disney company.
And when did you first become familiar with that policy?
It's something that's expected of you when you initially hire with the company, and then it's available to you as a resource, and there's periodic trainings or other means in which you are to be kept current with any changes in employee policy manual as it relates to.
Do you recall receiving any specific training related to sexual harassment that was conducted by Disney or a contractor that provided that training?
Over 30 years of
Yes,
employment, yes, there had been several different means in which the employee policy is communicated.
Do you recall when the last time you went through training related to sexual harassment?
No, I don't.
Do you know whether or not the policy, Disney's policy on sexual harassment, deals with unwanted touching?
Yes, it does.
And what do you recall specifically it says about unwanted touching?
Unwanted touching in the context of sexual harassment,
yes, sir,
is prohibited.
And if an employee says that if strike that. If employees attend award banquets or functions that are put on by Disney during non-working hours, does the sexual harassment policy still apply in those settings?
In my opinion, they would.
Okay. So if...
I'll caveat that in that as executives, we are hosts.
Yes,
As hosts, we are working. Cast who may be attending may generally feel they're not working as they're a guest at a company function, but I've always viewed it personally that when I'm representing the division and I'm hosting, that I'm working to the extent that I move about the tables and congratulate people that are at the function, as opposed to just attending as if I were a guest.
Makes sense to me, sir. So if a manager was to say, to testify under oath, that when Disney cast members attend these functions, award banquets or other after-hour functions, that they are consenting to be touched, would that be accurate?
Objective form, you can answer.
Let me just tell you what was specifically said,
Sure.
and then you can tell me whether it's true or not. During Miss Melissa Smirklinger's testimony, sitting right there in that chair that you're sitting in, she said that if an employee is attending a awards banquet or some other social function, by virtue of them being there, they're consenting to be touched. Is that an accurate statement of your understanding of the policy?
Objective form, you can answer.
I would describe the policy to you in this way, that a mere touching could be construed to be sexual harassment, and it may be a component of a sexual harassment. And the purpose of employee relations is to evaluate anyone who may feel as though a touching as I shook your hand when I entered the room was inappropriate.
Right.
So a touching, in my view, is not sexual harassment. It could be certainly construed or felt that someone was made uncomfortable by something, which is why employee relations exist, to review those types of circumstances.
I'm sorry for interrupting you. I didn't mean to do that. But if someone was attempting to kiss a co-employee without their permission, would that be construed in your understanding of the policy as harassment?
Objective form, you can answer.
Restate your question.
If an employee, one Disney employee, attempted to kiss another Disney employee without invitation or permission, would that potentially be a violation of the sexual harassment policy,
Objective form, you can answer.
as you understand it?
I mean, the term you're using, attempt,
Right. Yeah.
construed, I mean, anything is possible. That someone could view something that was not intended as such to be something by the person being affected by it differently, which is, again, why employee relations is charged with reviewing these types of circumstances in totality.
One moment. So does Disney have a policy that also governs or regulates romantic relationships between cast members?
Yes.
And what is that policy?
The policy in substance indicates that if two persons Want me to wait?
Go ahead. No, I'm listening. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. If two persons become involved in a relationship, and they are in a direct report relationship where one of those persons is the leader or person responsible for the other, the policy dictates that human resources must be notified of that relationship. And generally, one of those persons, if the relationship is being disclosed by one of the parties, the company takes the position that they should not be in a subordinate relationship with one another, and one of the persons is reassigned so that the subordinate direct reporting relationship no longer exists.
Okay, and you delineated that quite clearly. Is that a written policy?
It's my understanding that that's the substance of the policy you asked about.
But my additional question now is, what is that understanding based upon?
The policy.
What policy? Is it a policy number? If I were to be looking for that policy, if I was to send a request to your attorneys to produce that policy, what is the name of the policy?
Objective form, you can answer.
I've read it in the company policy manual. I don't know the site.
Is it an employee handbook that we're talking about, sir? Was it in an employee handbook?
It's an employee policy that's published online to all employees.
So it's online. Is that what you're telling me? That is it like currently online if an employee wanted?
Yes.
And how would is that through the HR site, or is it just a place online for all the policies and procedures for Disney?
It's online in the employee service portal for anyone to view it.
Sir, do you know someone by the name? How do you know her?
She's a friend of mine that previously worked with. She used to work for the company.
Did she work directly for you at some point?
Yes.
As your secretary?
At different times throughout my career and hers, yes.
When was the last time she worked for you as your secretary, sir?
Up until the time that she retired about 5 years ago.
And did you consider her to be a friend?
Yes.
Did you have a romantic relationship with Laura?
Instruct him not to answer for the reasons stated previously.
Sir, do you know someone by the name of Helena Mobley?
Yes.
Did she ever come into your office and observe you in an embrace with Miss Laura?
Same instruction.
It's a yes or no.
I
You're
instructed him not to answer the question. I'd also note deposition is not in Ms. Mobley's lawsuit.
You can answer the question unless she tells you not to answer.
I instructed him not to answer.
Same question, sir. Different question, rather. Did you ever disclose to the Disney HR, employee relations, or any entity that you had a romantic relationship with?
Instruct him not to answer for the reasons previously stated.
Okay. One moment. And did you ever go on a cruise or a vacation with?
Same instruction, not to answer.
So you said for you for 5 years prior to her retirement?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, I'm sorry. You said there was a 5-year period. You said something about 5 years. So,
No, I didn't.
oh, I thought you did. How long did Lola work for you? The last time that she worked for you?
The last time that she worked for me was approximately 5 years ago,
Okay.
at the time in which she retired.
All right, so that's where the 5 years came from. And what period of time did she work for you? That one last time that she actually worked for you?
I don't know specifically.
Was it more than 1 year?
She worked for 24 years. Do you want me to wait?
No, no. So you can answer the question.
She worked for the company for 24 years, as Melissa has, and there have been many times throughout both of our careers that we have worked together.
And I'm more asking about the times when she had a direct reporting relationship with you. The last time that you worked together, she was your subordinate. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And does that mean that you did her evaluations?
Yes.
Did you recommend her for bonuses?
No.
Did she ever get any bonuses?
No.
Was she entitled to receive bonuses?
No.
Okay, so she didn't get bonuses because she was not in a position to get bonuses. Is that correct? Was she salaried or was she hourly?
She was salaried.
Okay. And did she retire just through the regular process after having so many years there?
Object to form.
You understand the question, sir? I can rephrase it if not. It's no problem.
You can ask it again.
Yes, I'll try. Yeah. Did she retire for medical reasons, to your knowledge?
I'm going to object to the form and without a confidentiality agreement instruct him not to answer.
Was she facing any discipline? Do you know the answer to that question?
Same instruction. Relevance and without a confidentiality agreement, I'm instructing him not to answer.
During the time that you served as the director of security, do you recall whether or not there were any complaints filed by employees related to sexual harassment?
I'm sure that there were, but sexual harassment is within the parameters of employee relations and human resources to investigate. So
right.
I may have been aware that there had been investigations that were going on, but I did not conduct those investigations.
Well, help me to understand process. Mm-hmm. Isn't it the case that employee relations and or HR investigate, but then they make recommendations to the leaders?
Correct.
So then, if a claim of sexual harassment or any violation for that matter mm-hmm. is founded or sustained, whatever language, mm-hmm. then it's up to the leader to decide which discipline, what type of discipline to apply. Is that correct?
Objective form, you can answer.
Not as you've stated it.
Okay,
I can explain it if you'd like.
I would love for you to explain
okay.
it, sir.
The investigative body is employee relations or human resources.
Okay.
They are mandated by the company to investigate sexual harassment specifically. There is an investigation, and then the findings of those investigations are discussed with the location leader that's responsible and has been designated as the partnering leader for that investigation, along with legal with regard to the appropriate action to be taken.
Okay. And do you recall ever, in all of that process, administering any form of discipline to security employees related to sexual harassment claims?
I'm sure that there would have been several times that discipline has been decided within the process that I described. That discipline would have been in the 30 years that I've been in security.
To your knowledge, if a person is found to be in violation of the company's sexual harassment policy, what are some of the consequences or penalties that he or she may face?
You just want me to...
Yeah, that you are aware of. Yes, sir.
It varies based on the circumstances and the facts of the case, but it can vary through several levels of discipline or separation based on the specifics of the case.
Are you aware of any employee that was separated from the company for sexual harassment?
I'm sure there has been some, sir, but off the top of my head I couldn't name them for you.
Make a recommendation to management in terms of who should replace you now that you're retiring?
No.
Sir, just want to ask you some more questions about your job.
Sure.
At Disney. Prior to this current lawsuit that Ms. Book filed against Disney, were you aware at any point of a previous lawsuit that she filed? Okay. Do you recall in the year 2010 whether or not Ms. Book had filed a complaint alleging that she'd been discriminated against in the security department?
Your question is complaint, not lawsuit?
Not lawsuit, just an internal complaint at that point. And let me narrow the question. In and around the year 2010, were you ever notified that Ms. Book had filed a EEOC charge against Walt Disney?
I'm generally notified of EEO charges filed by security through legal.
Do you recall also in and around 2010 there was an issue with Ms. Book being concerned about her former husband coming to her workplace and potentially committing acts of violence against her?
I recall a concern being raised that was investigated.
How were you made aware of that concern?
In that concern involved a workplace violence. That's within the scope and purview of security investigations.
All right.
To be the primary investigative body,
right,
that interacts with HR and legal on their cases. I was made aware that that concern had been raised and was being investigated.
And was it your understanding, well, first of all, who made you aware of that concern?
I don't recall specifically. I just, and you referencing it, I do recall. So.
And do you recall whether or not Ms. Book was requesting that she not be required to work in a specific location for safety reasons, for her personal safety reasons?
Yes, I believe that was the context of the concern.
Was that concern brought to you because you had the ability to decide where she could work or where she would not work?
No.
Why was why was the information provided to you?
I testified.
Objective form, you can answer.
I testified I was aware of it.
Okay.
It's not in my scope to manage those cases.
Okay.
Nor is it in my scope to assign persons to particular areas or move persons outside of a collective bargaining agreement bid situation.
So whose area of responsibility was it at that time to move and assign employees to a particular area?
You have to be more specific because it's two parts.
Ms. Book stated that she has some concerns about a spouse, a former spouse, potentially committing a workplace violence act against her. She was specifically concerned about working in a location where that individual would have access to her. Who had the authority to assign her to one location or another at that time?
Okay, I'm going to have to break it down for you.
Sure.
Workplace violence matters are investigated by workplace trained investigators.
Got that.
Make a recommendation to legal and HR.
Okay.
With regard to moving someone outside of a bid contractual location, there would be interaction with employee relations with regard to an exception to the contract, as if a grievance were filed. They needed to be consulted with regard to someone being assigned outside of the contractual bid.
And that's clear. I appreciate that. In this case, do you know whether or not, number one, did she make a request? Do you recall whether or not a request was made on her part to be assigned outside of her contractually bid area?
I wouldn't have been involved in that.
So you would not played any role in that at all?
No.
Do you know whether or not she was assigned to work in downtown Disney after she specifically requested not to be placed in that location?
No, I don't.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So is it accurate that these 125 salaried leaders that 125 to 130 salaried leaders, they either worked for Melissa or Al or Michael? Is that correct?
Would be correct.
Okay. Now, just for the record, I think I know some of the answers, but what is Melissa Merklinger's race?
She's white.
What is Al Cardino?
Hispanic.
What is Michael's, whatever his last name is, race?
White.
Okay. Does Disney have a policy that governs diversity in the workforce?
I'm going to object to form. You can answer.
I don't know what you mean by govern. It's a inclusive environment at Disney.
All right,
Diversity is valued.
Does Disney place a high value on having a diverse workforce?
Disney values diversity.
Does Disney also value having a diverse leadership force?
Yeah.
Object to form. You can go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. So I want to talk more specifically about some of the other leaders that you are aware of this 125. Obviously, I know you can't name all the names, but specifically, do you recall, or not? Let's not say specifically. Generally, percentage-wise, what was the makeup of the leadership team within the security department in terms of race? What percentage was white? What percentage was black? What percentage was Hispanic?
Object to form. You can answer.
I don't know.
Do you know whether or not Disney tracked such numbers in terms of the races and the national origins of the leaders?
Object to form. You can answer.
They may. I'm not personally aware of that, nor do I know.
Were you ever asked to report such information to HR or to employee relations?
No.
Do you know a person named Margaret Giacalone? Giacalone? Okay. Do you know that name?
Yes.
How do you know that name?
Colleague, when I worked for Disney, she's the chief legal counsel for Walt Disney World.
She worked with Mr. Armando Rodriguez?
Yes.
She Ms. Rodriguez's boss?
I believe so.
Okay. And is she also a personal friend of yours?
I know her through work.
But do you socialize?
I would consider her a friend.
Do you socialize with her outside of the work setting?
In what way?
Go to dinner, go have drinks together? That way?
We have gone to lunch before as colleagues.